The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Officer Jason Mitchell tightened his grip on Max's leash. The German shepherd's muscles tensed beneath his black and tan coat, sensing the gravity in the air. 20 yards ahead, elderly Henry Caldwell stood with his back against the rust-stained wall of the abandoned West Side manufacturing plant. Confusion etched across his weathered face. "Last warning! Put your hands where I can see them!" Chief Walters bellowed, his service weapon trained on the 78-year-old. Henry's trembling hand moved slowly toward his jacket pocket. "Release the dog," Walters commanded. Mitchell unclipped Max's lead. "Packin' attack," he ordered, pointing at Henry. Max lunged forward, powerful, purposeful, closing half the distance in a heartbeat. Then, inexplicably, he stopped. His ears flicked forward, head tilting as though listening to a voice only he could hear. "What the hell?" "Attack!" Mitchell shouted again. The assembled officers watched in stunned silence as Max, the department's most decorated K-9, padded gently toward the elderly man, sat at his feet, and looked up with intelligent brown eyes that seemed to say, "This man is not our enemy. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story." Max hadn't always been the pride of Ridgewood Police Department's K-9 unit. 3 years ago, he was just another rescue a malnourished 2-year-old German shepherd discovered during a raid on an illegal dog training operation outside Phoenix. When Animal Control first brought him in, he cowered in the corner of his kennel, suspicious of human touch and quick to bare his teeth. His coat was dull, patchy in places, hiding scars that told stories of cruelty no animal should endure. Frank Harrison, then the department's senior K-9 trainer with 30 years of experience, saw something in those wary amber eyes. "This one's special," he'd told Mitchell, who was just starting with the unit. "Damaged, sure. But look at that focus, that intelligence." Where others saw a lost cause, Frank recognized potential. Against department protocol and his captain's recommendation, Frank took Max home that night. 6 months of patience, specialized training, and unwavering kindness transformed Max into a different animal. His coat gleamed in the sunlight, muscles rippled beneath as he aced every training challenge. But more remarkable was the trust he developed first with Frank, then gradually with other handlers. By his 3rd year, Max had credentials most K-9s would envy: 6 successful missing persons locations, 12 drug busts, and 3 life-saving interventions. Officer Jason Mitchell had been Max's handler for only 7 months, since Frank's retirement. At 29, Mitchell was ambitious, decorated with commendations from his patrol days, but the transition hadn't been seamless. While Max performed his duties impeccably, the bond Frank had warned was essential remained elusive. "He'll obey you," Frank had said during the handover, "but you've got to earn his respect." Henry Caldwell lived alone in a modest bungalow on Sycamore Street. A Vietnam veteran with a Purple Heart, he'd spent his retirement years tending a small garden and walking daily to the Veterans Center downtown. Recently, neighbors had noticed changes: Henry forgetting to collect his mail, sometimes appearing disoriented on his familiar routes. The early-stage dementia diagnosis came 6 months ago, but Henry had stubbornly maintained his independence. Chief Raymond Walters had climbed Ridgewood PD's ranks over 30 years through what he called practical policing results that played well in press conferences and city council meetings. With re-election approaching and pressure mounting over the recent string of robberies targeting seniors, Walters needed a win, At 58, he wasn't about to let his legacy be tarnished by unsolved cases. The series of home invasions had begun 3 months ago, striking fear into Ridgewood's elderly community. 6 break-ins, each following a pattern: houses with single occupants over 70, always between 1 and 4 a.m., always with surgical precision. The perpetrator disabled security systems, entered through rear windows, and took only cash, jewelry, and prescription medications. Most disturbing was how the intruder seemed to know exactly when victims received their Social Security checks or filled their pain prescriptions. Detective Sarah Lawson had been working the case tirelessly, but leads were scarce. No fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses, until Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins from Maple Drive reported seeing an elderly man lingering outside victim number 5's house the day before the robbery. Medium height, white hair, walked with a slight limp. She'd told Detective Lawson, looked out of place, like maybe he was confused. That description led patrol officers to pay special attention to seniors in the area. And Henry Caldwell's name came up when Officer Rodriguez found him wandering 2 blocks from the most recent crime scene at 5:30 a.m., disoriented and unable to explain why he was out so early. The morning patrol brought him home, Mitchell explained to the K-9 unit briefing that afternoon. He claimed he was looking for his dog, though neighbors confirm he hasn't owned one in years. Chief Walters stood at the front of the room, arms crossed. We've got a partial boot print from the Jenkins scene, size 10 distinctive wear pattern on the heel. I want confirmation. With respect, sir, Detective Lawson interjected. Mr. Caldwell doesn't fit the physical profile we're developing. These robberies require agility, strength. What they require, Walters cut her off, is inside knowledge of the victim's routines. Caldwell volunteers at the senior center where 4 of our 6 victims are members. Mitchell had been quietly reviewing the file. Says here Caldwell has no criminal record. Neither did the BTK killer until they caught him. Walters replied flatly. Rodriguez, get a warrant for Caldwell's residence. Mitchell, I want Max to check the scent from the crime scene against Caldwell's home. An hour later, Mitchell and Max stood outside Henry's modest bungalow. Rodriguez handed over a sealed evidence bag containing a pillowcase from the latest victim's home. Lab says it's got a good concentration of foreign scent particles, Rodriguez explained, not contaminated by first responders. Mitchell crouched beside Max, who sat attentively, his intelligent eyes fixed on his handler. This was routine. Max had performed scent identifications dozens of times. Such a good boy, Mitchell murmured, opening the bag carefully and allowing Max to take several deep inhales of the fabric. Seek, he commanded, his voice shifting to the firm tone reserved for work. Max's demeanor transformed instantly, head lowered, nose working rapidly. He began quartering the front yard methodically. Halfway to the porch, he froze, then changed direction toward the side of the house. Mitchell followed, noting how Max's behavior indicated a promising scent trail rather than random exploration. Around back, Max led them to a detached garage with peeling paint and a padlocked door. He circled it twice, then sat his alert signal. "We've got something," Mitchell called to Rodriguez. The warrant covered all structures on the property. Rodriguez made quick work of the padlock with bolt cutters, and the door swung open with a protesting creak. Inside, beneath a tarp. They found what appeared to be a motorcycle covered in dust. Rodriguez pulled back the covering to reveal a vintage Harley-Davidson. "Doesn't look like it's been ridden in years," he observed. Max continued working, moving decisively to a workbench along the back wall. He alerted again, pawing at a cabinet beneath. Inside the cabinet, Mitchell found an old shoebox containing photographs, dozens of them, yellowed with age. They showed a younger Henry in what appeared to be police uniform, alongside various German shepherds in canine vests. "What the hell?" Mitchell muttered, examining the photos. "Mitchell Rodriguez," Chief Walter's voice boomed from outside. "Get out here." They emerged to find Walter standing by a patrol car, holding a clear evidence bag. Inside was a pair of muddy boots. "Found these by the back door. Size 10. We're taking them in for comparison," Walters announced, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "Where's Caldwell now?" "According to neighbors, he walks to Westside Park every afternoon around this time," Rodriguez replied. "All units, be advised." Walters spoke into his radio. "Suspect in the senior robbery series may be at Westside Park. White male, 78 years old, white hair, blue windbreaker. Approach with caution." 2 patrol units responded immediately, reporting they were minutes from the park. Mitchell felt uneasy as he loaded Max back into the K9 vehicle. "You're not convinced," Rodriguez observed from the passenger seat. Mitchell frowned. "Something's off. Those photos in the garage, they looked like official K9 unit pictures. Old man could have been security somewhere. Who knows? Focus on the evidence we have, not what we don't understand." The radio crackled. "Suspect spotted heading east from Westside Park toward the old manufacturing district. He's moving quickly, seems agitated. All units respond," Walters commanded. "Mitchell, bring the dog. If he runs, we'll need Max." By the time they arrived, a perimeter had formed around the abandoned Westside manufacturing plant. According to the first officers on scene, Henry had entered the building after spotting the patrol cars. "He's cornered in the main assembly area," Officer Turner reported. "No other exits except the loading dock on the south side. And Peterson's got that covered." Walters took charge immediately. "Mitchell, take point with the K9. We don't know if he's armed." "Sir, with respect, Mr. Caldwell is nearly 80, and potentially our robbery suspect who's been terrorizing elderly residents for months." Walters interrupted. "I'm not taking chances. Use the dog to flush him out." Mitchell felt Max tense beside him as they approached the entrance, as though the German shepherd sensed his handler's reluctance. Inside, the abandoned factory was a maze of shadows and rusting equipment. Dust motes danced in shafts of afternoon light streaming through broken windows. "Police, Henry Caldwell. This is Officer Mitchell with the Ridgewood Police Department. Come out with your hands visible." No response came from the cavernous space ahead. Mitchell unclipped Max's tactical lead, giving him the hand signal to advance and search. Max moved forward cautiously, his training evident in every deliberate step. Within minutes, Max's behavior changed. A soft whine. His tail held differently subtle signals that indicated he'd located someone. Mitchell followed, weapon drawn but pointed down, as department policy dictated when working with a K9. That's when they found Henry, backed against a wall in what once had been an employee break room, looking confused and frightened. "Mr. Caldwell," Mitchell called, maintaining distance. "We need you to put your hands where we can see them." "Sir." I was looking for someone," Henry stammered, his voice quavering. "Someone important." Over Mitchell's shoulder, more officers appeared, Walters among them. The chief pushed forward, his patience visibly thin. "Hands up! Caldwell! Now!" Henry's weathered face registered surprise, then indignation. Raymond Walters. Is that you?" The chief froze momentarily, then recovered. "Last chance. Henry, show us your hands." When Henry's hand moved toward his jacket pocket, everything accelerated. Max felt the tension in the room like an electric current, his sensitive ears picking up the accelerated heartbeats of the humans surrounding him. Training told him to focus on Officer Mitchell, to wait for commands. But something else, something deeper, made him hesitate as the elderly man reached toward his pocket. "I said freeze!" Chief Walters shouted, his service weapon leveled squarely at Henry's chest. "For God's sake, I'm just getting my ID," Henry protested, his voice wavering but indignant. Mitchell's command came sharp and clear. "Max! Packin'!" The attack command triggered Max's muscle memory. He launched forward, covering half the distance to Henry in a powerful surge. Then something unexpected happened. A scent memory registered in Max's highly developed olfactory system. Beneath the elderly man's cologne and the medicinal smell of arthritis cream was something familiar. Something that brought flashes of comfort, of safety, of gentle hands and soft words during those first terrifying days after his rescue. Max slowed, his training battling with instinct. "Max, I said packin'," Mitchell repeated, confusion evident in his voice. The German shepherd stopped entirely, just feet from Henry. He tilted his head, ears forward, taking in more information than the humans around him could possibly comprehend. Henry stood very still, his eyes not on the officers but on Max. There was no fear in those weathered eyes, only recognition. "Well, hello there," Henry said softly, in a tone reserved for old friends. Mitchell felt his professional certainty waver. In 7 months as Max's handler, he'd never seen the dog disobey a direct command during operations. Max was the department's most reliable K9 with a flawless service record. "Mitchell, what the hell is going on with your dog?" Walters demanded, not lowering his weapon. Before Mitchell could respond, Max did something even more unexpected. He approached Henry slowly, not in the aggressive stance of an attack posture, but with his head slightly lowered, tail at half-mast, the canine body language of cautious greeting. When he reached the elderly man, Max simply sat at his feet, looking up expectantly. "I don't understand," Mitchell muttered. The tableau held for several tense seconds officers with weapons drawn, an elderly suspect with his back against the wall, and an award-winning police K9 sitting calmly at the man's feet like an old family pet waiting for attention. Henry's trembling hand finally emerged from his pocket, not with a weapon, but with a small dog biscuit, broken and lint-covered. "Still got a sweet tooth, just like your mama," Henry said with a smile. Max accepted the treat gently, further confounding the assembled officers. "Sir, step away from the dog," Mitchell ordered, trying to regain control of the situation. "You got quite a partner here, son," Henry replied, making no move to step away. "Luna's boy, if I'm not mistaken." Got her eyes. The name sent a jolt through Mitchell. Luna had been Max's mother, a legendary K-9 in the department before retiring 5 years ago. The connection wasn't public knowledge, not something a random civilian should know. "How do you know about Luna?" Mitchell asked, lowering his weapon slightly. Chief Walters cut in sharply. "That's enough. Caldwell, you're under arrest for the robbery series. Mitchell, control your dog and cuff the suspect." "Max, come," Mitchell commanded, snapping his fingers and pointing to his side. For the second time, Max defied training. He remained seated by Henry, his posture now subtly shifting to place himself between the elderly man and the officers, a protective stance. "I said come," Mitchell repeated more forcefully. Henry placed a gentle hand on Max's head. "He's not going to leave me, son. Dogs remember." "They always remember." The radio on Mitchell's shoulder crackled to life. "Dispatch to all units. We have reports of a break-in in progress at 1420 Oak Ridge Lane. Homeowner Rose Williams, 82, activated her panic button. Patrol units responding." Mitchell's eyes met Walters. Oak Ridge Lane was on the opposite side of town from the manufacturing plant. There was no way Henry could be responsible for a robbery happening right now. "Chief," Mitchell began cautiously, "this doesn't clear him from the previous incidents." Walters snapped. "Take him in. We'll sort it out at the station." As Mitchell approached with handcuffs, Max let out a low warning growl, not aggressive, but clearly communicating. Mitchell had seen this behavior in training scenarios where K-9s protected handlers from perceived threats. "Max, stand down," Mitchell ordered, genuinely confused by his partner's behavior. Henry sighed. "Your dog is trying to tell you something, officer. Something important." "Good." He slowly, carefully lowered himself to one knee, grimacing with the effort, and spoke directly to Max. "It's okay, boy. I'll be all right. You go on with your handler now." At those words, delivered in a gentle tone that carried authority despite the man's age, Max reluctantly stood and took 2 steps toward Mitchell, though his eyes remained fixed on Henry. "That's it," Henry encouraged. "Good boy." When Mitchell finally managed to secure the handcuffs around Henry's wrists, the elderly man offered no resistance. Max watched the procedure with visible anxiety, whining softly. "I'll need to take your statement about how you know this dog," Mitchell said quietly as he helped Henry to his feet. "Been training German Shepherds since before you were born, son," Henry replied. "You don't forget the bloodlines." As they escorted Henry from the building, Mitchell kept Max close, noting how the dog's attention remained fixed on their suspect. Outside, the Arizona sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement of the old factory lot. Detective Lawson waited by the patrol cars, her expression troubled. "Chief, we need to talk. The break-in at Oak Ridge Lane matches our pattern exactly. Same entry point, same items targeted. Could be a copycat," Walters dismissed. "In the 2 hours since we've been focused on Mr. Caldwell," Lawson challenged. "Sir, with respect, we need to consider—" "What we need," Walters interrupted, "is to process the suspect we have and compare those boots to our print evidence. Mitchell, get your dog under control and transport Caldwell to the station." Back at the Ridgewood Police Department, Mitchell secured Max in the K-9 unit's holding area, a comfortable space with water, bedding, and toys where working dogs could decompress between shifts. Contrary to his usual routine, Max paced anxiously, showing no interest in water or rest. "What's gotten into you today?" Mitchell asked, crouching to eye level with his partner. Max whined, pawing at the gate separating them. Down the hall. The booking process for Henry Caldwell was underway. Through the observation window, Mitchell watched as the elderly man sat patiently, answering questions with dignity, despite the humiliation of fingerprinting and processing. Captain Rivera, head of Internal Affairs, appeared at Mitchell's side. "Officer, I need a word." They stepped into a nearby conference room, where Rivera didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Want to explain what happened with your K-9 today?" Mitchell straightened. "Sir, I don't have an explanation yet. Max has never refused commands before. You understand this creates complications for the case. Defense could argue the dog sensed Caldwell's innocence, making everything we discover subsequently fruit of a poisonous tree." "I understand, sir." Rivera studied him. "Chief Walters has requested Max be temporarily suspended from duty pending a re-evaluation. You'll be reassigned to patrol until further notice." The news hit Mitchell like a physical blow. "Captain, Max is the best K-9 in the unit. One unusual incident doesn't—" "This isn't a discussion. Mitchell, the department can't risk liability. Clear out Max's equipment and take him home tonight. Report for patrol duty tomorrow at 0800. After Rivera left, Mitchell returned to the K-9 area, where Max had finally settled, though his posture remained alert. When Mitchell opened the gate, the dog immediately pressed against his leg, sensing his handler's distress. "It's just you and me tonight, buddy," Mitchell said softly, clipping on Max's lead. "Let's go home and figure this out." As they passed the booking area, Max pulled toward the glass, staring intently at Henry, who now sat alone in the interview room awaiting questioning. The elderly man looked up, somehow sensing their presence, and offered a small, sad smile directly at Max. The German shepherd whined softly, and Mitchell felt the leash grow taut with longing. The clock on Mitchell's nightstand read 2:17 a.m. when he finally accepted that sleep wouldn't come. Beside the bed, Max lay awake too, ears perking up instantly when Mitchell sat up and switched on the lamp. The German shepherd's intelligent eyes followed him as he moved to the kitchen, opened his laptop, and began searching through department personnel files, something he knew bordered on protocol violation without proper authorization. "This doesn't make sense, Max," he muttered, scrolling through historical K-9 unit records. "How does Henry Caldwell know about Luna, and why did you react that way?" Max padded over, resting his chin on Mitchell's knee, as the officer dug deeper. 3 cups of coffee later, as dawn began lightening the horizon, Mitchell found what he was looking for buried in digitized records from 30 years ago. A younger Henry Caldwell stared back from the screen, standing proudly in Ridgewood PD uniform with sergeant's stripes. The department's K-9 training division patch clearly visible on his shoulder. Beside him sat a magnificent German shepherd, identified in the caption as K-9 Officer Ranger, 2-time regional trials champion. "Son of a gun," Mitchell whispered, scratching behind Max's ears. "He wasn't just security. He was one of us." Further searches revealed Henry's distinguished 22-year career with the department, specializing in K-9 training and handling. More surprising, was his published work articles in police journals about the Caldwell method, an innovative training approach emphasizing positive reinforcement and handler-dog bonding over the more punitive methods common in the 1980s. Mitchell sat back, processing this revelation. The timestamp on Henry's retirement, April 1993, caught his attention. It seemed abrupt for someone with his accomplishments. No commendation ceremony, no standard pension acknowledgement in the department newsletter, just a brief administrative note recording his departure. "Something happened," Mitchell told Max, who listened with head tilted. "Something they didn't want in the official record." When Mitchell arrived at Frank Harrison's modest ranch house later that morning, the retired canine trainer was already in his workshop, crafting the custom leashes and collars he now sold to police departments nationwide. At 67, Frank remained robust, his hands strong and sure as he worked leather through brass fittings. "Wasn't expecting company on my day off," Frank said, not looking up from his work. "Especially not from an officer who should be on patrol duty." "Called in sick," Mitchell admitted, taking a seat on a nearby stool. Max immediately went to Frank, receiving an affectionate ear rub. "Need to ask you something off the record." Frank finally looked up, noting Mitchell's exhausted appearance. "This about yesterday's incident? It's all over department scuttlebutt. You know Henry Caldwell?" Frank's hands stilled. "Who's asking, you or the department?" "Me. Just me." The older man sighed, setting aside his tools. "Henry Caldwell is the reason I became a canine handler. Best damn trainer the department ever had. Maybe the state. Developed a whole methodology when everyone else was still using choke chains and fear. What happened to him? Why'd he leave so suddenly?" Frank's weathered face hardened. "Official record says he retired for personal reasons. Truth's more complicated. I need to know." "Frank," Max recognized him somehow, "refused to engage when I gave the attack command." A look of understanding crossed Frank's features. "Max is Luna's pup. Luna came from Ranger's bloodline. Henry's last partner before everything went sideways." He stood, crossing to a cabinet in the corner. "Been keeping this. Not sure why. Maybe for a day like today." He returned with a faded manila folder, the edges worn soft with age. Inside were newspaper clippings, interdepartmental memos, and photographs all centered around an incident in 1993. "There was a bank robbery," Frank explained. 3 armed suspects, hostage situation. Henry and Ranger were first K-9 team on scene. Chief ordered immediate entry against Henry's assessment that the situation needed negotiation. Mitchell skimmed the materials as Frank continued. Entry went bad. Officer down. Suspect with dead man switch on what looked like explosives. Ranger detected something, kept alerting, trying to pull Henry back. But the Chief Walters, he was just a lieutenant then, overrode Henry. Ordered Ranger to attack. Did the dog obey? Frank shook his head. Ranger refused, just like Max yesterday. Walters called it insubordination, failure of training, took his service weapon, tried to advance himself. His voice grew tight. Explosion took out half the building, killed 2 officers, 1 hostage. Jesus, Mitchell breathed. Investigation cleared Henry Ranger had detected the explosive, was trying to warn them, but by then, damage was done. Walters had already filed reports questioning Henry's methods. suggesting his soft approach to canine training created unreliable dogs. Department sided with Walters. They needed a scapegoat. Henry was forced into retirement. His methods discredited. And Ranger? Put down, Frank said flatly. Labeled unpredictably disobedient and destroyed despite Henry's protests. That's when Henry left town, couldn't bear to stay after losing his partner that way. Mitchell looked at Max, who had settled at Frank's feet. But why would Max recognize Henry? That connection is generations back. Frank smiled sadly. Henry didn't stop working with dogs after leaving the force. Set up a training center outside Phoenix. Specialized in rehabilitating canines that had been abused or incorrectly trained. The pieces clicked into place. The facility where Max was rescued was originally Henry's place. He'd retired about 5 years before that raid, sold it to a former student who apparently perverted everything Henry taught. But Max would have spent his early training weeks there when Henry still ran it. Dogs don't forget people who showed them kindness, especially during formative periods. Mitchell ran a hand over his face. Frank, they're building a case against Henry for these home invasions targeting seniors. The evidence is circumstantial, but Walters is pushing hard. History repeating, Frank muttered. Walters never could admit when he was wrong. Cost lives back then, who knows what it'll cost now. After leaving Frank's place, Mitchell drove to the senior center where Henry volunteered. The morning activities were in full swing, a watercolor class in one corner, seated yoga in another. The director, Barbara Simmons, remembered Henry fondly. Such a gentle soul, she said, leading Mitchell to a small office. Hard to believe anyone would suspect him of something so terrible. Those seniors he worked with, they trusted him completely. What exactly did he do here? Mitchell asked. Ran our therapy dog program. Barbara explained, showing him photographs on the wall. Henry appeared in several, alongside seniors and various therapy dogs. He'd bring in trained dogs twice weekly for the residents. Did wonders for their morale, especially the memory care patients. She pulled out a logbook. Henry kept meticulous records of every session, which resident, which dog, their progress. Mitchell flipped through the book, noting how the entries lined up with victims in the robbery series. Did Henry have access to personal information about the residents' medical details, financial information? Barbara looked offended. Absolutely not. That would violate numerous privacy laws. He only knew what the residents chose to share during sessions. On his way out, Mitchell passed a bulletin board covered with community announcements. A flyer for home security systems caught his eye specifically. The company logo, Safeguard Security Solutions, with a tagline promising peace of mind for seniors living independently. Do you know if any of your members use this company? He asked Barbara. Oh, yes. They did a presentation here last month. Very popular, offered our members a special discount. Mitchell's phone rang as he reached his car. Detective Lawson. Mitchell. Where are you? Walters is looking for you. Following up on something. What's happening with Henry Caldwell? Lab results came back on the boots. Partial match to our crime scene prints, but inconsistent wear pattern. I don't think they're the same boots that made the original prints, but Walters is calling it conclusive. What about the robbery last night? Same MO exactly. Unless Caldwell has an accomplice or can bilocate, he's not our guy for that one. I think there's a connection through Safeguard Security. They did installations for all the victims, had a presentation at the senior center where Henry volunteers. A pause. That's worth looking into. But tread carefully. Walters is pushing the DA to file charges against Caldwell today. At the station that afternoon, Mitchell found the atmosphere tense. He'd barely reached his desk when Chief Walters summoned him to his office. "Care to explain why you accessed historical personnel files at 3 a.m. without authorization?" Walters demanded without preamble. "Or why you called in sick but were seen at Frank Harrison's residence and the Ridgewood Senior Center?" Mitchell met the chief's gaze steadily. "Following up on inconsistencies in the Caldwell case, sir. That case is closed. We have physical evidence linking him to the scene." "Partial, inconclusive evidence," Mitchell corrected. "And it doesn't explain the identical robbery that occurred while he was in our custody." Walters's face darkened. "You're a K-9 officer, Mitchell or were, until your dog's behavior compromised our case. Detective work isn't your jurisdiction. With respect, sir, I believe there's a connection you're not seeing." "What I see," Walters said coldly, "is an officer overstepping boundaries because his dog had a bad day. You're suspended, effective immediately. Turn in your badge and weapon pending an internal review." Mitchell had anticipated this possibility. "Before I do, I'd like to see Henry Caldwell." "Absolutely not. It's my right to understand why my K-9 partner malfunctioned during an operation," Mitchell pressed. "For proper documentation in my incident report." Walters stared him down, then reached for his phone. "Fine. 10 minutes, supervised. Then you're out of my station." The holding cells were in the basement level, cold and institutional despite recent renovations. Henry sat on a narrow cot, looking smaller and more fragile than he had the day before. When the cell door opened, he looked up with resigned dignity. "Officer Mitchell," he acknowledged. "Come to ask why your dog disobeyed." Mitchell took the single chair opposite the cot. Through the open door, a uniformed officer maintained visual contact but remained out of earshot. "Among other things," Mitchell said, "you were K-9 Division. You trained Ranger, Luna's grandsire." A flicker of surprise crossed Henry's weathered features. "You've been doing homework. I need to understand what happened yesterday." Henry's gaze turned distant. "Dogs remember scents better than anything. Your Max, he would have been just a pup when I last handled him, maybe 8 weeks old. But that imprint remains. You knew his mother. Trained her myself. Before selling my facility. Luna was special, had Ranger's intelligence, his discernment. Pride brightened his tired eyes. Some bloodlines carry more than physical traits. They pass down temperament, working ability, even judgment." Mitchell leaned forward. "Frank told me about what happened in '93, about Ranger trying to warn you about the explosives." Pain flashed across Henry's face. "Walters never forgave me for being right, cost me my career. Cost Ranger his life." He sighed. "Now here we are again, him rushing to judgment, me on the wrong side of a cell door. The robberies. I had nothing to do with them," Henry stated firmly, "though I understand how it looks. Wrong place, wrong time. Old man with a spotty memory. You were looking for someone at the manufacturing plant. Who?" Henry hesitated. "My memory isn't what it was. Sometimes I get confused." Think Ranger's still with me." His voice cracked slightly. "Yesterday was one of those days. Something about that old factory seemed important, connected to him somehow." Mitchell studied the elderly man carefully. The early dementia diagnosis explained some of his behavior, but not everything. "Safeguard Security," Mitchell said. "Did you recommend them to the seniors in your therapy program?" Henry frowned. "No, they came to the center themselves. Slick presentation. Too good to be true discounts. I actually warned some members to be cautious. Companies that target seniors often have hidden fees." Before Mitchell could probe further, the supervising officer interrupted. "Time's up." Mitchell stood reluctantly. "I'm looking into some connections. Mr. Caldwell, if you remember anything about Safeguard or think of anything that might help your case, ask to speak with Detective Lawson." As he turned to leave, Henry called after him. "Officer Mitchell, take care of Max. He's special, like his ancestors. Don't let them convince you his disobedience was a failure. Sometimes, refusing an order is the highest form of service." Those words echoed in Mitchell's mind as he drove home, badge and service weapon secured in a department envelope on the passenger seat. Max greeted him at the door with unusual enthusiasm, sensing something amiss in his handler's demeanor. Mitchell's apartment felt different in daylight hours when he should have been on duty. He moved restlessly from room to room, Max following closely. On his kitchen table, he spread out everything he'd gathered: the historical documents from Frank, notes from his senior center visit, and printouts about Safeguard Security. The company was relatively new, established just 18 months ago, but had quickly secured contracts throughout Ridgewood's affluent senior communities. Their founder and CEO, Jacob Turner, had an impressive resume in executive protection services. Mitchell found his photograph in a Business Journal article, mid-30s, polished appearance, the picture of entrepreneurial success. As the afternoon stretched into evening, Mitchell's phone remained silent. No calls from Walters, no updates from Lawson. The suspension had effectively cut him off from case developments. Frustrated, he took Max for a long walk through the neighborhood, trying to clear his head. When they returned, Mitchell found a plain envelope had been slipped under his door. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a handwritten note. "Marina Storage Unit number 47. Midnight. Come alone if you want the truth about Caldwell. A friend." Mitchell stared at the cryptic message, debating his next move. As a suspended officer, pursuing this could end his career permanently. But as Max settled at his feet with unwavering loyalty, he thought of Henry's words. Sometimes, refusing an order is the highest form of service. "What do you think, partner?" he asked Max, who tilted his head attentively. "Worth the risk?" The German shepherd's steady gaze seemed answer enough. Mitchell checked his watch, 10:43 p.m. Just enough time to prepare properly. In his closet, behind winter clothes he rarely needed in Arizona. Mitchell kept a small lockbox. Inside was his personal weapon, legally registered, separate from his service pistol and a civilian-grade tactical vest. Not department equipment, nothing that could be traced back to Ridgewood PD. If he was walking into a trap, he'd do so as prepared as possible. "Sorry, buddy, you need to stay here," he told Max, who watched with evident disapproval as Mitchell prepared to leave alone. "Too risky." At the door, Mitchell hesitated, looking back at the German shepherd sitting alert in the entryway. Max's posture communicated readiness, his intelligent eyes fixed on his handler, with what Mitchell could only interpret as determination. The memory of Max defying orders to protect Henry Caldwell flashed through Mitchell's mind. Perhaps there was wisdom in that canine instinct that human judgment missed. "All right?" Mitchell relented, retrieving Max's lead. "We do this together, but you follow my commands to the letter. Understand?" Max's tail swished once against the floor agreement in the subtle language they'd developed over months of partnership. The Ridgewood Marina was quiet at this hour. Most boat owners long since returned to shore. The restaurant and shops closed for the night. Security lighting cast pools of yellow illumination along the dock walkways, with deeper shadows between. Mitchell parked 2 blocks away, approaching on foot with Max at his side, both moving silently through the darkness. Storage units lined the northern edge of the marina, metal containers converted for boating equipment, each with a roll-up door and padlock. Unit number 47 was at the far end, partially obscured by a stack of empty crates. Mitchell paused at a distance, scanning for signs of an ambush. "Stay," he whispered to Max, who immediately dropped into a watchful down position behind a wooden pallet, heart pounding, hand near his concealed weapon. Mitchell approached the unit. The padlock hung open, the hasp loose. Someone had already accessed it. He took a steadying breath, then pulled the door upward in one swift motion, stepping back immediately. Nothing happened. No movement. No sound from within. After 30 seconds of tense waiting, Mitchell risked a look inside. The beam of his flashlight revealed a unit mostly empty except for a single chair, a small table, and what appeared to be a laptop computer. On the screen, a video player was paused, showing an image of an elderly person's home interior. "Hello," Mitchell called softly. "Anyone here?" Only silence answered. Cautiously, he stepped inside, moving to examine the computer. A sticky note attached to the keyboard read simply, "Press play." Mitchell hesitated, then hit the space bar. The video began crystal clear security footage showing the interior of what he recognized as Eleanor Jenkins' home, the 5th robbery victim. The timestamp showed 2:14 a.m., 3 weeks earlier. As Mitchell watched, a figure in dark clothing entered through the kitchen window, moving with practiced efficiency through the house. The burglar wore a ski mask, but something about their movements seemed familiar. The video switched to another angle, showing the intruder in the master bedroom, carefully selecting jewelry and prescription bottles. When they turned toward the camera, the mask shifted slightly, just enough to reveal a partial profile. Mitchell froze the frame, leaning closer. The facial features visible in that brief moment weren't Henry Caldwell's elderly profile. They belonged to someone much younger. The door rolled down with a metallic clang behind him. Mitchell spun, drawing his weapon in one fluid motion, but found himself facing emptiness. The door had closed automatically. Heart racing, he moved to push it up again, but stopped at the sound of a familiar voice coming from the laptop speakers. "I wouldn't leave just yet. Officer Mitchell, the show's just getting started." He turned back to see the video had changed to a live feed showing the exterior of the storage unit where he now stood. Standing before the camera was Jacob Turner, CEO of Safeguard Security. "Sorry I couldn't meet in person," Turner continued, his voice smooth and controlled. But I thought you might appreciate some privacy for what comes next. Behind Turner, partially obscured in shadow, stood a familiar figure that made Mitchell's blood run cold, Chief Raymond Walters. Mitchell's pulse hammered in his ears as he processed the scene on the laptop. Chief Walters stood partially obscured behind Turner, his expression unreadable in the dim marina lighting. "Surprised?" Turner asked, his voice carrying through the speakers with artificial clarity. "I imagine you are. The dedicated police chief working with the very criminal he's supposedly hunting." He smiled, revealing perfect white teeth that gleamed predatorily in the darkness. "But then, Raymond and I go way back, don't we, Chief?" Walters remained silent, his posture rigid. "What do you want?" Mitchell demanded, eyes darting between the screen and the closed door. His hand moved to his phone, but Turner's next words stopped him. "I wouldn't bother with your phone. Officer, no signal reaches this unit Faraday cage effect from all the metal. Quite convenient, really." Mitchell's mind raced through options. Max was still outside, hidden from view. If he could somehow signal the dog, "I've been watching you, Mitchell." Turner continued conversationally, asking questions about Henry Caldwell, digging into old department history. Normally I'd admire such dedication, but it's becoming problematic. "The robberies," Mitchell said, playing for time. "All the victims had safeguard systems installed." Turner gave an appreciative nod. "Brilliant business model. Isn't it? Install security systems for vulnerable seniors, gather their data, habits, medication schedules when they receive pension deposits, then use the system's own backdoor access to disable them during entry. The perfect inside job." "And Walters has been covering for you," Mitchell stated, the betrayal bitter in his mouth. The camera angle widened slightly, bringing Walters fully into frame. The chief's face was ashen, his usual authoritative demeanor replaced by something Mitchell had never seen before: fear. "The chief and I have an arrangement," Turner explained. "I keep certain historical indiscretions buried, and he ensures investigations go in convenient directions, like toward a confused old man with dementia." "Henry knew you," Mitchell realized aloud. "From before. That's why you needed him discredited. Very good." Turner's false cheer had a manic edge. Henry Caldwell might be losing his short-term memory, but he never forgets a face. He saw me at the senior center presentation and recognized me immediately, though he couldn't quite place from where. Started asking uncomfortable questions, watching me. It was only a matter of time before he made the connection. The pieces aligned in Mitchell's mind. "You were involved in the bank robbery in '93, the one where Ranger detected the explosives." Turner's smile faded. "I was 19, stupid kid running with the wrong crowd. When everything went sideways, Walters helped me disappear new identity, clean slate. All I had to do was keep quiet about his role in those officers' deaths." He shrugged. "We've maintained our mutually beneficial relationship ever since." On screen, Walters finally spoke, his voice hollow. "Enough, Jacob. You've made your point. Have I?" Turner raised an eyebrow. "Because Officer Mitchell is still connecting dots, still trying to clear Henry Caldwell. That complicates things for both of us. Raymond." Mitchell's eyes scanned the storage unit. looking for any potential escape. The walls were solid metal, the door securely shut. The only furniture was the chair and table holding the laptop. Nothing he could use as a weapon or tool. "What happens now?" Mitchell asked, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Now," Turner replied. "We have a tragic accident. Suspended officer. Clearly unstable after his K-9 partner's bizarre behavior. Breaks into marina storage looking for evidence of conspiracy. Discovers nothing. Becomes despondent. Perhaps suicidal. Such a shame." Mitchell's hand tightened on his concealed weapon. "You really think you'll get away with this?" "I already have 5 times over." Turner smiled. "And with the chief of police as my alibi for tonight, who would question the official report?" Outside the storage unit, Max remained in his downstay position, watching and listening with senses far more acute than any human's. The German Shepherd had heard the metallic clang of the door closing, sensed the change in air pressure, detected the subtle shift in his handler's pheromones that signaled danger. Training told him to maintain position until called. But instinct, the same instinct that had made him refuse to attack Henry Caldwell, urged action. Silently. The dog rose, moving toward the storage unit with practiced stealth. Inside, Mitchell was calculating odds. If Turner and Walters were planning to kill him, they wouldn't be taking their time with explanations. They needed something first. "What do you want from me?" he demanded. "Smart man." Turner nodded approvingly. "I need access to this evidence you've gathered, Frank's historical documents. Your notes from the senior center, anything connecting me to Henry or the old case. Once those are secured, we can proceed with the unfortunate accident. And if I refuse, then instead of a quick, clean end, we explore alternatives involving your suspended K-9 partner. I understand German Shepherds can be quite aggressive when improperly trained. Tragic attacks happen all the time." The threat against Max ignited something primal in Mitchell's chest. "You touch my dog, You'll what?" Turner interrupted, his facade of civility dropping momentarily. "You're locked in a metal box with no backup, no communication, and no leverage. The chief and I will be entering shortly with a proposition you'd be wise to accept." The video feed cut abruptly, leaving Mitchell staring at a blank screen. Seconds later, he heard footsteps approaching outside, followed by the scrape of a key in the padlock. Mitchell drew his weapon, positioning himself against the wall beside the door. If they were coming in, he'd at least have the element of surprise. The door began to rise slowly. Mitchell held his breath, finger hovering near the trigger, knowing he might have only one chance. As the opening widened to about 3 feet, he tensed, preparing to confront whoever entered. Instead, a low growl preceded 60 pounds of focused German Shepherd launching through the gap. Max entered in full protection mode, immediately placing himself between the opening and Mitchell. "Max," Mitchell whispered in shock and relief. Outside, a startled curse was followed by the sound of a weapon being drawn. "Call off your dog, Mitchell," Turner's voice commanded, all pretense of friendliness gone. "Now." Mitchell made a split-second decision. "Max, find," he ordered in the specific tone used for suspect apprehension. The German Shepherd exploded back through the opening, a blur of black and tan. A shout of alarm was followed by the distinctive sound of a body hitting the ground. Mitchell rushed out, weapon ready, to find Max had taken down Turner, pinning him by the arm with a controlled bite. Chief Walters stood 10 feet away, service weapon drawn but hesitating, unwilling to fire at the K-9. "Drop it, Chief," Mitchell ordered, aiming directly at Walters. "Don't make this worse than it already is." The moment hung suspended in the humid night air, Turner pinned and howling beneath Max's powerful jaws, Walters with weapon raised, Mitchell steady in his combat stance. "You don't understand," Walters said, his voice barely audible. "He has evidence that would destroy me. The '93 case, I falsified reports, buried witness statements that supported Henry's version of events." "I know," Mitchell replied, not lowering his weapon. "Frank told me everything. How you overrode Henry's assessment, how Ranger tried to warn everyone about the explosives, how you scapegoated them both when it went bad." Walter's hand trembled slightly. "I was ambitious. Thought I knew better than some dog. When it all went wrong, it was easier to blame Henry than admit I'd gotten 2 officers killed. And Turner was there, one of the bank robbers. You helped him disappear in exchange for his silence. He was just a kid caught up with the wrong people," Walters said defensively. "I gave him a second chance, while destroying Henry's life and having his dog put down," Mitchell countered. "And now you're framing him for Turner's crimes. When does it end?" "Chief." Beneath Max's controlled hold, Turner managed to speak through clenched teeth. "If I go down, he goes with me. Every case he's ever touched will be reopened, his whole career destroyed." "Maybe that's justice," Mitchell said coldly. For a moment, Mitchell thought Walters might actually fire. The chief's face contorted with indecision, the weapon wavering between Mitchell and the ground. Then, with a sound like a deflating balloon, Walters lowered the gun. "I'm tired," he said simply. 30 years of looking over my shoulder, waiting for the truth to catch up. Maybe it's time." He placed his service weapon on the ground and kicked it toward Mitchell. "Call your dog off. We'll do this properly." Mitchell hesitated, uncertain if this was another trap. "Max." "Us," he finally commanded, using the release word. Max immediately released Turner's arm, but remained in guard position, a continuous low growl rumbling in his chest. Turner rolled away, clutching his injured arm, face contorted with pain and rage. "You're making a mistake," he spat. "I still have the evidence against Walters. One phone call, and it goes public. Evidence like the security footage showing you committing the robberies," Mitchell countered. "Or your convenient backdoor access to all the victims' homes. I think we'll take our chances." Mitchell pulled zip ties from his pocket standard equipment he'd brought along as precaution and secured Turner's wrists. As he patted the man down for weapons, he discovered a small remote control device. "What's this?" he demanded. Turner's expression shifted to something more calculated. "Insurance. Every good plan has a contingency." Before Mitchell could react, Turner twisted awkwardly despite his restraints, managing to press a button on the device with his fingertip. Immediately, the storage unit behind them erupted in flames, a controlled explosion that sent the metal door flying outward. The concussive force knocked Mitchell forward. Max barked sharply, moving protectively toward his handler. In the chaos, Turner scrambled to his feet and bolted toward the marina's edge. "Chief!" Mitchell shouted, regaining his balance. "Stop him!" But Walters seemed frozen, staring at the burning storage unit with haunted eyes, perhaps seeing echoes of another explosion long ago. Max didn't hesitate. Without command, the German Shepherd raced after Turner, covering the distance in seconds. This time, the bite was less controlled. Max took Turner down hard, clamping onto his leg with enough force to elicit a scream that cut through the night. Mitchell ran to them, weapon trained on Turner. "Don't move," he ordered. Though the command was unnecessary, with 60 pounds of determined German Shepherd ensuring compliance, the marina erupted in activity as security personnel responded to the explosion. In the distance, sirens wailed. The fire would have triggered multiple emergency calls. As Mitchell secured Turner more thoroughly, he realized Max's attention had shifted. The dog was staring intently past the burning storage unit, hackles raised. Following his partner's gaze, Mitchell spotted movement, two figures slipping between the shadows of boats docked at the far end of the marina. Accomplices, Mitchell realized aloud. If Turner had backup, the situation could escalate rapidly. Mitchell faced a choice: stay with the apprehended suspect or pursue the fleeing figures who might have crucial evidence. Before he could decide, Chief Walters stepped forward. "Go," he said, taking Turner's restraints from Mitchell. "I've got him. This is my mess. Let me start cleaning it up." Mitchell hesitated, uncertain whether to trust the man who'd betrayed everything his badge represented. "I swear on my 30 years, Walters said, meeting Mitchell's eyes. "No more running from what I've done." Something in the chief's expression, a bone-deep weariness, perhaps, or genuine remorse, convinced Mitchell. He nodded once, then turned to Max. "Find," he commanded, pointing toward where they'd last seen movement. Max took off immediately. Mitchell following close behind, they raced past the burning storage unit between rows of moored boats, the German Shepherd tracking with unerring precision despite the confusing mix of scents from the marina. At the far dock, Max paused, nose working rapidly. Mitchell caught up, breathing hard, scanning the area. The dock ended at a large yacht, its upper deck dark, but a light glowing from within the cabin. Max's posture changed, alert, focused, tail straight. He'd found their quarry. "Good boy," Mitchell whispered, drawing his weapon. "Stay close." They approached the yacht cautiously. As they neared the gangplank, an engine suddenly roared to life. The yacht's running lights illuminated, and it began to pull away from the dock. "Stop, police!" Mitchell shouted, knowing it was futile over the engine noise. Without hesitation, Max raced up the gangplank just as it began to lift. Mitchell had no choice but to follow, making a desperate leap onto the departing vessel. He landed hard on the deck, rolling to absorb the impact as the yacht accelerated into the dark waters. Inside the cabin, Mitchell heard shouting, followed by a crash and a man's cry of pain. Max had found someone. Drawing his weapon, Mitchell moved toward the cabin entrance. Before he could reach it, a figure burst out, a man in his 30s, clutching a bleeding forearm where Max had clearly made contact. "Stop right there," Mitchell ordered, weapon trained on the man's chest. Instead, the man lunged sideways, grabbing a fire extinguisher mounted on the cabin wall and hurling it at Mitchell. The officer dodged, but the momentary distraction was enough for the man to race toward the yacht's stern. "Max, packin'," Mitchell commanded, using the attack command that Max had refused with Henry. This time, the German Shepherd responded instantly, launching after the fleeing suspect with incredible speed. The man reached the stern rail and prepared to jump overboard, but Max was faster. The dog's powerful jaws clamped around the man's calf, bringing him down with a howl of pain. Mitchell rushed forward, securing the suspect with his remaining zip ties. "Where's your partner?" he demanded. "Go to hell!" The man spat. A noise from above drew Mitchell's attention. On the upper deck, a second figure was aiming what appeared to be a spear gun directly at them. "Max! Down!" Mitchell shouted, throwing himself sideways. The spear hissed through the air, missing Mitchell by inches and embedding itself in the deck. Max, responding to years of training, had dropped instantly at the command. The shooter fumbled to reload, giving Mitchell precious seconds to aim his weapon. "Drop it now," he ordered. Instead, the figure leveled the reloaded spear gun directly at Max. Mitchell didn't hesitate. He fired twice, hitting the shooter in the shoulder. The spear gun clattered to the deck as its wielder fell back with a cry of pain. "Stay down!" Mitchell shouted, advancing cautiously up the stairs to the upper deck, Max close behind him. The wounded shooter lay sprawled on the deck, clutching a bleeding shoulder. In the yacht's running lights, Mitchell could finally see their face clearly. A young man, early 20s perhaps, with a striking resemblance to Jacob Turner. "Martin Turner," the young man gasped through pain. "Jacob's my father. He said you'd try to ruin everything." Mitchell kept his weapon trained on Martin while checking for additional weapons. "Your father ruined things himself when he decided to prey on vulnerable seniors." "You don't understand," Martin hissed. "We were building something permanent." As Mitchell secured Martin with his last zip tie, a shout from below drew his attention. The first man had somehow worked free of his restraints and was making another break for it. "Max, watch," Mitchell ordered, leaving the dog to guard Martin while he raced back down to the main deck. The first suspect had reached the yacht's controls and was increasing speed, heading deeper into open water and away from the marina's lights. Mitchell charged into the cabin, weapon raised. "Stop the boat now!" The man spun, revealing a handgun that he'd concealed earlier. "Back off!" he shouted, aiming directly at Mitchell's chest. Time seemed to slow. Mitchell registered several things simultaneously, the suspect's finger tightening on the trigger. The distance too great to close before a shot could be fired. The cold certainty that he might not survive the next few seconds. A blur of motion from the cabin's side entrance was his salvation. Max, having left his guard post upon sensing his handler's danger, launched himself at the armed suspect with a ferocity Mitchell had never witnessed. The gun discharged, the bullet striking the ceiling as Max's weight crashed into the gunman. The thunderous echo of the gunshot reverberated through the yacht's cabin, leaving Mitchell's ears ringing as he fought to process the chaotic scene unfolding before him. Max had the gunman pinned. The German shepherd's powerful jaws clamped around the man's forearm in a trained hold, preventing him from using the weapon. But something was wrong. Max's normally fluid movements seemed labored, his stance unsteady. "Max aus," Mitchell commanded, rushing forward to secure the suspect. The dog released his grip and took 2 faltering steps backward. That's when Mitchell saw it, a dark stain spreading across Max's tawny shoulder, matting his fur. The bullet hadn't hit the ceiling cleanly. It had grazed Max first. "No, no, no," Mitchell muttered, his heart constricting as he roughly secured the gunman's wrists with the man's own belt, no longer concerned with proper procedure. "Stay still, boy. Easy now." Max tried to maintain his alert posture, but wobbled, a whimper escaping as his injured leg began to give way. Mitchell gently eased him to the deck, hands trembling as he assessed the wound. It wasn't immediately life-threatening. The bullet had torn through muscle rather than hitting anything vital, but blood loss was a serious concern, and without treatment, shock could set in rapidly. Mitchell stripped off his jacket, pressing it against the wound while radioing for emergency assistance using the yacht's communication system. "Officer needs assistance, K9 officer down." Gunshot wound. I'm approximately 2 miles offshore from Ridgewood Marina, heading east in a white yacht. Have 2 suspects secured. Need immediate medical support for injured K9. The dispatcher's voice crackled back, confirming that Harbor Patrol and emergency services were en route. Mitchell turned the yacht back toward shore, keeping one hand pressed firmly against Max's wound while steering with the other. The German Shepherd's breathing had become shallow, his normally bright eyes clouded with pain. "Stay with me, partner," Mitchell urged, fighting the tightness in his throat. "We're almost there. You did good. You did so good." Max's tail thumped weakly against the deck acknowledgement, reassurance even in his pain, trying to comfort his handler. The simple gesture nearly broke Mitchell. Harbor Patrol intercepted them halfway back, boarding with weapons drawn until Mitchell identified himself. Paramedics followed immediately, but their focus shifted to the human suspects after a quick assessment of Max. "We need a veterinary emergency specialist," Mitchell insisted, still applying pressure to Max's wound. "He's lost too much blood." "Desert Valley Emergency Vet is being notified," one officer assured him. "They'll meet us at the marina. 5 minutes out." Those 5 minutes stretched like hours. Max's breathing grew more labored, his body trembling beneath Mitchell's hands. The powerful animal that had fearlessly faced armed criminals just moments ago now seemed fragile, mortality evident in every strained breath. As they docked, a flurry of activity erupted on the pier. Police cruisers, their lights painting the night in red and blue strokes, lined the marina entrance. Among them, Mitchell spotted an unmarked van with Desert Valley 24-hour Veterinary Hospital emblazoned on its side. A team in scrubs rushed forward with a stretcher as Mitchell carried Max from the yacht, the German Shepherd's substantial weight suddenly feeling like the most precious burden he'd ever borne. Gently, they transferred Max to the stretcher, an oxygen mask immediately placed over his muzzle. "GSW to right shoulder. Significant blood loss. Pulse rapid, but steady," Mitchell reported, falling into clinical language to keep his emotions at bay. "He was conscious and responsive until about 2 minutes ago." The veterinarian, a woman with calm efficiency etched into every movement, nodded. "We'll take it from here, officer. He's in good hands." Mitchell moved to follow them to the van, but a firm hand on his shoulder stopped him. Detective Lawson stood there, her expression a complex mixture of concern and urgency. "The suspects are secure," she said. "But there's something you need to know. Henry Caldwell's been released. Evidence from Turner's apartment cleared him completely. He's asking for you." Mitchell felt torn in half. Max needed him, but so did Henry. "I can't leave Max. He took that bullet for me." "The vet team knows what they're doing," Lawson assured him. "And there's nothing you can do for Max during surgery." "But Henry—" She hesitated. "He's at Ridgewood Memorial. Collapsed shortly after release, apparent heart attack. Doctors aren't optimistic." The news hit Mitchell like physical blow. "Heart attack when?" "About an hour ago. He's been asking for you and the dog. Something about needing to tell you both something important." Mitchell looked back at the veterinary van, now pulling away with lights flashing. "Take me to Henry," he decided, though the words felt like they were being torn from him. "And have someone call me the instant there's news about Max." The drive to Ridgewood Memorial passed in a blur of sirens and streetlights. Mitchell's uniform was stained with Max's blood, drawing concerned glances from hospital staff as Lawson led him through antiseptic-scented corridors to the cardiac care unit. Outside room 317, a nurse intercepted them. "Family only at this hour," she began, then noticed Mitchell's bloodied appearance. "Are you injured, officer?" "It's not my blood," Mitchell explained hoarsely. "I'm here to see Henry Caldwell. I understand he's asking for me." The nurse's expression softened. "Mr. Caldwell indicated you should be allowed in if you arrived, but I should warn you his condition is critical. Try not to agitate him." Inside, the room was dimly lit, medical equipment casting an eerie blue glow across Henry's frail form. The elderly man seemed to have shrunk since Mitchell had last seen him, his weathered face now ashen, oxygen tubes running beneath his nose. A cardiac monitor beeped steadily, though the rhythm displayed wasn't reassuring. "Officer Mitchell," Henry whispered, his voice barely audible. "You came." Mitchell approached the bedside, gently taking Henry's papery hand. "I'm here, sir." "Your dog?" Henry asked, eyes searching behind Mitchell. "Max was injured. He's with the emergency vet team now." Mitchell's voice caught. "He saved my life tonight." A ghost of a smile touched Henry's lips. "Good boy. Ranger's blood runs true." His gaze drifted to the window, where dawn was just beginning to lighten the horizon. "Did you catch them, Turner and his accomplices?" "Yes, sir." Chief Walters, too, he confessed everything. About the 93 case, about helping Turner disappear, about framing you for the robberies. Your name will be cleared completely. Henry closed his eyes briefly. "Raymond always was a decent man who made terrible choices. Fear does that makes cowards of good men." "Sir," Mitchell ventured carefully, "the doctors say you had a heart attack. But there's something else, isn't there? Something you haven't told anyone?" Henry's gaze met Mitchell's, a lifetime of wisdom in those faded blue eyes. "Cancer, stage 4, diagnosed 6 months ago, right around when the memory problems started. Refused treatment at my age. What's the point of buying a few painful months?" He drew a labored breath. "Wasn't supposed to go this way, though. Heart giving out before the cancer could finish the job." Mitchell felt an unexpected surge of grief for this man he barely knew. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Henry murmured. "I've made my peace. But there's something you need to know about Max, about his lineage." Mitchell leaned closer, not wanting to miss a word. "Luna wasn't just any police dog," Henry explained, his voice growing weaker. "She was the last of Ranger's direct line that I personally trained. When I sold my facility, I made sure she and her final litter went to good homes." He paused, gathering strength. "Max has the gift, just like Ranger did. That instinct that goes beyond training, the ability to sense truth from deception, danger from safety. He knew you weren't guilty," Mitchell confirmed. "And he sensed Turner was dangerous before I did." Henry nodded weakly. "That bloodline has always been special. Too smart for their own good sometimes. Ranger died because he refused an order he knew was wrong." His grip on Mitchell's hand tightened slightly. "Promise me you'll protect Max from those who don't understand. Don't let them punish him for having better judgment than his human handlers." "I promise," Mitchell said fervently. "No one will ever punish him for doing what's right." Henry seemed to relax at those words, sinking deeper into his pillows. "Good. That's good." His gaze drifted again, focusing on something Mitchell couldn't see. Been thinking about Ranger a lot lately. Wonder if he'll be waiting for me. The cardiac monitor's rhythm changed subtly, the beeps coming slightly farther apart. A nurse appeared in the doorway, checking the readings with professional concern. "Max," Henry whispered, so softly Mitchell had to lean even closer. "Bring him to see me. If there's time. One last visit with Ranger's heir." Mitchell swallowed hard, knowing the likelihood of fulfilling that wish was slim. "I'll try, sir. I promise I'll try." Henry's eyes closed, his breathing growing more shallow. The nurse moved forward, adjusting something on the IV line. "He needs to rest now," she told Mitchell quietly but firmly. In the corridor outside, Mitchell checked his phone, no calls from the veterinary hospital yet. He paced the waiting area, alternating between worry for Max and grief for Henry, both lives hanging by increasingly fragile threads. Dawn had broken fully when Mitchell's phone finally rang. He answered before the first ring completed. "Mitchell here. How's Max?" The veterinarian's voice was professionally measured. "Officer Mitchell, Max is out of surgery. The bullet caused significant tissue damage and blood loss, but we've stabilized him for now." "For now," Mitchell repeated, hearing the reservation in her tone. "There are complications. The bullet fragment nicked an artery. We've repaired it, but he's not out of danger yet. The next 24 hours will be critical." Mitchell leaned against the wall, suddenly dizzy with exhaustion and relief and renewed fear. "Can I see him?" "He's in recovery. You can come in about an hour, but he'll be heavily sedated." After ending the call, Mitchell returned to Henry's room, finding the elderly man's condition had deteriorated further. The doctor attending him shook his head grimly. "His heart is failing," he explained quietly. "We're making him comfortable, but I'm afraid it's just a matter of hours now." Mitchell thought of Henry's last request to see Max one final time, to say goodbye to the descendant of his beloved partner. But with Max in critical condition himself, it seemed an impossible wish to fulfill. The fluorescent lights of Desert Valley Veterinary Hospital cast harsh shadows across the recovery ward where Max lay, his powerful body now vulnerable and still. Multiple monitors tracked his vital signs, IV tubes delivering fluids and medication into his system. The German Shepherd's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, a large white bandage covering his right shoulder where the bullet had torn through muscle and grazed the artery beneath. Mitchell sat beside the metal examination table that had been converted to a recovery bed, his hand gently resting on Max's uninjured shoulder. The veterinarian, Dr. Amanda Chen, reviewed the charts with practiced efficiency. "He's stable for now, but still critical," she explained. "The next 12 hours will tell us more. The blood loss was significant, and though we've repaired the arterial damage, there's risk of infection and secondary hemorrhage." "But he'll recover," Mitchell pressed, needing more certainty than medical caution allowed. Dr. Chen's expression softened. "He's young, strong, and in excellent physical condition. Those factors work strongly in his favor. But I can't make absolute promises." Mitchell nodded, understanding the limitation of guarantees. He'd seen too many sure things go wrong in his years on the force to expect different from veterinary medicine. "There's something else," he said hesitantly. "There's an elderly man at Ridgewood Memorial, Henry Caldwell. He's dying. Probably won't make it through the day. He's asked to see Max one last time. Is there any way?" Dr. Chen frowned. "Moving a critical patient is highly inadvisable. The stress alone could compromise his recovery." "I understand," Mitchell said, disappointment heavy in his chest. It would have meant a lot to them both. His phone vibrated with an incoming text from Detective Lawson. "Henry's condition deteriorating rapidly. If you're coming back, don't wait." Mitchell was caught in an impossible choice: stay with his injured partner or return to Henry's bedside for what might be the man's final moments. Before he could decide, Dr. Chen spoke again. "Let me make some calls," she said, surprising him. "There might be a way to safely transport him, but I'll need to coordinate with the hospital staff and get approval from our medical director." Hope flickered briefly. "Thank you for trying." While Dr. Chen stepped out to make her calls, Mitchell gently stroked Max's head, fingers finding the familiar spot behind his ears that usually made the dog lean into his touch. Now, under heavy sedation, Max remained unresponsive. "You saved my life, partner," Mitchell whispered. "More than once. Now I need you to fight. Fight to come back." Dr. Chen returned 20 minutes later, accompanied by 2 veterinary technicians and what appeared to be a specialized transport gurney. "We have conditional approval," she announced. "We can move him briefly, 30 minutes maximum, including transport time. We'll maintain sedation and monitoring throughout." Mitchell felt a wave of gratitude. "Thank you. This means more than you know." "I'm coming with him," Dr. Chen clarified. "At the first sign of distress, we return immediately. These are non-negotiable terms." "Understood." The process of preparing Max for transport was meticulous. The technicians carefully transferred him to the specialized gurney, securing monitoring equipment and IV lines. Dr. Chen checked and rechecked his vitals, ensuring the sedation level would keep him comfortable but safe during the short journey. The veterinary hospital's emergency transport vehicle, essentially an ambulance for animals, was brought to the loading bay. Once Max was secured inside, Mitchell joined him, sitting where he could maintain physical contact with his partner throughout the drive. At Ridgewood Memorial, they were met by hospital administrators who had been forewarned of their unusual arrival. Despite initial objections from nursing staff, Henry's attending physician had approved the visit, recognizing its importance to his failing patient. "He's been asking for the dog every time he regains consciousness," the doctor explained as they carefully navigated the gurney through the hospital corridors. "Whatever this connection is, it seems to be keeping him holding on." In Henry's room, the atmosphere had changed. The machinery remained, but additional equipment had been brought in the unmistakable preparations for end-of-life care. Henry lay still, oxygen mask covering his face. But his eyes opened when he heard them enter. "Max," he whispered. The name barely audible through the mask. The veterinary team positioned Max's gurney alongside Henry's bed, adjusting the height so the elderly man could see the German shepherd without straining. With trembling hands, Henry reached out, his weathered fingers gently touching Max's fur. "There you are. Good boy," he murmured. "Ranger would be proud of you." To everyone's surprise, Max's sedated state seemed to lighten slightly at Henry's touch. His eyelids flickered, and though he didn't fully wake, his tail moved in the faintest suggestion of recognition. "They said you were hurt, protecting your handler," Henry continued, each word an effort. "Just like Ranger tried to protect me. Some things run in the blood, I suppose." Mitchell pulled a chair close to the other side of Henry's bed. "Sir, there's something you should know. We found evidence in Turner's apartment records going back decades. The truth about what happened in '93 is finally coming out." Henry's eyes shifted to Mitchell, a question in them. Chief Walters gave a full confession. He admitted falsifying reports, suppressing evidence that Ranger detected the explosives. Everything. The department is launching a comprehensive review of the case. A single tear tracked down Henry's weathered cheek. "After all these years." "Your name will be fully cleared," Mitchell assured him. "And Ranger's, too. The department is already talking about posthumously honoring him for his actions that day, recognizing that he tried to prevent the tragedy." Henry's hand never left Max's fur, fingers gently stroking in the same pattern that Mitchell had seen experienced canine handlers use to calm their partners. Too late for Ranger, but not too late for his legacy. His gaze returned to Max. "This boy carries on what Ranger started. That special instinct, that ability to see what we humans miss." Dr. Chen checked her watch, then Max's vital signs. "Officer Mitchell, we need to start preparing to transport him back soon." Henry nodded in understanding. "Just another minute, please." He summoned his remaining strength to address Mitchell directly. "When I sold my training facility 5 years ago, I had one condition in the contract that Luna's final litter be placed according to my specifications. Max was the pick of that litter. I made sure he went to the department where Ranger and I had served." The revelation stunned Mitchell. "You arranged for Max to come to Ridgewood Canine Unit even after everything that happened." "Especially because of what happened," Henry corrected. "I knew someday the truth would need to come out. Dogs like Ranger, like Max, they see the truth when humans can't or won't. I hoped." He paused, gathering strength. "I hoped someday one of Ranger's line might help set things right." Dr. Chen stepped forward again, more insistently. "His vitals are fluctuating. We need to go now." Henry gave a small nod of acceptance. "Take good care of him, Officer Mitchell. Let him trust his instincts, even when they contradict your orders. Sometimes the wisest choice is to listen to your dog." "I will, sir. I promise." As the veterinary team prepared to move Max, Henry's hand fell away from the German shepherd's fur. The cardiac monitor's rhythm changed subtly, not dramatically, but with the unmistakable pattern of a heart beginning its final decline. "Would you stay?" Henry asked Mitchell quietly. "Just for a little while." Mitchell nodded, taking the elderly man's hand as Max was carefully wheeled from the room. "As long as you need." An hour later, Henry Caldwell passed peacefully. The vindication he'd waited 30 years to receive finally granted in his final moments. Mitchell remained at his bedside until the end, bearing witness to the quiet dignity with which the former canine officer faced his last deployment. When Mitchell returned to the veterinary hospital that evening, he found Max's condition had stabilized somewhat. The German shepherd was still heavily sedated, but had shown positive responses to treatment. Dr. Chen was cautiously optimistic. The visit seemed to help him too, Somehow, she observed, his vitals actually improved after returning from the hospital. It's not scientifically explainable, but I've seen enough in my career to know there are connections between beings that medicine can't fully account for. Mitchell sat beside Max's recovery bed, letting the events of the past 48 hours finally catch up to him. Chief Walters was in custody, facing multiple charges. Jacob Turner and his accomplices were being processed for the robbery series and the attempted murder of a police officer. And the truth about what happened in 1993, the truth that had cost Ranger his life and Henry his career, was finally emerging into the light. "Henry's gone, Max," Mitchell said softly to his sedated partner. "But he died knowing the truth would come out, knowing that what Ranger tried to do wasn't forgotten." He gently stroked the German shepherd's head. "And he made sure you found your way to me. Somehow. Across all those years. He made sure Ranger's legacy continued." As if in response, Max's tail moved slightly against the blanket, a small gesture of acknowledgement or perhaps comfort, offered even through the haze of sedation and pain. Outside the recovery room window, Mitchell could see the Arizona sunset painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. Tomorrow would bring debriefings, statements, the beginning of sorting through the complex web of corruption and concealment that had finally been exposed. But for tonight, in this quiet room with the steady beep of monitors marking Max's continued fight, Mitchell allowed himself to feel a measure of peace. 6 months later, the Ridgewood Community Park bustled with activity as families gathered for the annual Police Service Recognition Day. Under the dappled shade of mature oak trees, white tents housed displays showcasing various department divisions. Children lined up for tours of patrol vehicles, and the tantalizing aroma of barbecue filled the air. At the center of the park, a stage had been erected, adorned with red, white, and blue bunting. Waiting for the afternoon ceremony, Mitchell adjusted his dress uniform, the weight of the formal attire unfamiliar after months in the more casual K-9 Training Division attire. Beside him, Max sat at perfect attention, his coat gleaming in the sunlight, a stark contrast to the memory of him lying wounded and vulnerable in the veterinary hospital. The only visible reminder of that night was a small patch of fur that grew slightly differently over his right shoulder, covering the scar beneath. "You clean up nice, partner," Mitchell said, straightening Max's ceremonial collar. The German shepherd's intelligent eyes held his gaze with what Mitchell had come to recognize as affection and understanding. Max's recovery had been neither quick nor easy. 3 surgeries had been required to fully repair the arterial damage, followed by months of rehabilitation. Mitchell had been by his side through all of it, even sleeping on the floor beside Max's bed during those first critical weeks at home. Gradually, the powerful animal had regained his strength. Though Dr. Chen had warned that he would likely never return to active duty, the risk of re-injury to the compromised shoulder was too great. But fate, it seemed, had other plans for them both. "Officer Mitchell, they're ready for you," called Lieutenant Sandra Morgan, the newly appointed head of Ridgewood's restructured K-9 division. "Quite a crowd turned out." Mitchell nodded, surveying the gathering. Indeed, nearly half the town seemed to have assembled, along with media representatives from Phoenix and beyond. The story had captured national attention: a corrupt police chief, a decades-old cover-up, an elderly former officer finally vindicated, And, at the center of it all, a German shepherd whose extraordinary instincts had brought the truth to light. "Max ready for his moment in the spotlight?" Morgan asked with a smile. "Born ready," Mitchell replied. Though in truth, he was the nervous one. Public speaking had never been his strength, and today's ceremony carried emotional weight that technical briefings never did. As they approached the stage, Mitchell spotted familiar faces in the front row. Frank Harrison, looking proud in his Sunday best, Detective Lawson, recently promoted to head the department's new Professional Standards Bureau, and most touchingly, several residents from Ridgewood Assisted Living who had arranged special transportation to attend. Among them sat Mrs. Eleanor Jenkins, the witness whose description had initially cast suspicion on Henry Caldwell. She had been among the first to insist on a formal apology from the department after the truth emerged. The interim chief of police, Victoria Ramirez, approached the podium, her presence commanding immediate respect. In the 3 months since her appointment, she had moved decisively to rebuild trust in a department shaken by Walter's betrayal. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, thank you for joining us on this significant day," she began. "We gather not only to recognize exceptional service, but to acknowledge past wrongs and celebrate the healing that truth can bring." She spoke briefly about the case that had exposed corruption within the department's highest ranks, not shying away from the failures of leadership and oversight. "Institutions are only as strong as the integrity of those who serve within them," she reminded the audience. "When that integrity falters, we must have the courage to acknowledge it, learn from it, and rebuild stronger than before." Chief Ramirez then introduced Frank Harrison, who rose to speak about the Caldwell method of canine training that had been dismissed 30 years ago but was now being implemented department-wide. Henry understood something fundamental that many of us took decades to recognize. The retired trainer said, emotion evident in his voice. He knew that the strongest partnership between handler and dog isn't built on dominance or fear, but on mutual respect and trust. When a dog like Max disobeys a command, sometimes he's not being stubborn, he's trying to tell us something important. If only we have the wisdom to listen. When Mitchell's turn came to speak, he approached the podium with Max at his side, feeling the weight of responsibility to honor not only his partner, but the legacy that had made their partnership possible. 6 months ago, I gave Max a command to attack an elderly man who appeared to be reaching for a weapon, Mitchell began, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. Max refused that order, the only time in his service he had ever done so. At the time, I considered it a failure of training. Now I understand it was the highest form of service. He recounted how Max's instinctive recognition of Henry had been the first thread that unraveled a tapestry of deception spanning 3 decades. This remarkable animal sensed what human systems of justice had missed, that an innocent man had been wronged, and that the truth had been buried beneath layers of self-protection and fear. Mitchell detailed their harrowing night at the marina, how Max had saved his life at nearly the cost of his own, and how, in his injured state, the German shepherd had still insisted on protecting his handler. The bullet that struck Max damaged his shoulder in ways that would normally end a canine officer's career, Mitchell explained. But sometimes, one door closing opens another. While Max can no longer pursue suspects or perform the physically demanding aspects of patrol work, his instincts and intelligence remain undiminished. He gestured to the side of the stage, where a group of children sat with their parents. Which is why today, I'm honored to announce the launch of the Henry Caldwell K9 Training Academy's youth program, with Max as our ambassador and lead demonstration dog. Through this program, a new generation will learn about responsible dog ownership, the human-animal bond, and the extraordinary capabilities of working dogs like Max. The announcement drew enthusiastic applause, particularly from the children who had already fallen in love with the dignified German Shepherd during preliminary program testing. As the ceremony continued, Mitchell knelt beside Max, offering a small treat from his pocket, a gesture that would have been considered unprofessional in his previous understanding of K9 handling, but now felt right and proper, acknowledging the dog not merely as a tool or asset, but as a thinking, feeling partner. "Henry would be proud," he whispered to Max, whose tail swept once against the stage floor in quiet acknowledgment. Later, as afternoon stretched toward evening, Mitchell and Max walked slowly along the park's perimeter path. The German Shepherd moved with the slight asymmetry that had become his new normal, his injured shoulder occasionally causing a subtle hitch in his stride. Yet there was no diminishment in his alertness, his dignity, or his evident satisfaction in his work. They paused at a newly installed bench overlooking the duck pond. A small bronze plaque gleamed in the fading sunlight. "In memory of Sergeant Henry Caldwell and K9 Officer Ranger, their loyalty and courage remind us that sometimes the bravest act is to trust your instincts, even when they defy orders." Mitchell sat on the bench, and Max settled beside him, both watching the golden light of sunset transform the landscape. Tomorrow would bring new classes, new students, new opportunities to share what they had learned through trial and sacrifice. But for this moment, in the quiet of approaching evening, it was enough to simply be two partners, bonded by experience and mutual respect, carrying forward a legacy born of one dog's refusal to attack when every human system had gotten it wrong. "Sometimes the bravest thing isn't following orders," Mitchell murmured, echoing Henry's words from their final conversation. "It's knowing when they're wrong." Max's head lifted at the sound of his voice, those intelligent eyes meeting Mitchell's with what could only be described as understanding. In that silent exchange between human and dog lay everything that Henry Caldwell had tried to teach, that wisdom sometimes comes in forms we least expect, and that true partnership transcends the limitations of species and speech. As they rose to leave, a young girl approached cautiously, her mother hovering protectively nearby. "Can I pet your dog, officer?" she asked, her voice hushed with admiration. Mitchell smiled. "His name is Max, and yes, you may if he agrees." Max, ever perceptive, gently approached the child, lowering his head to allow her small hand to stroke his fur. The girl's face lit with delight at this communion with an animal whose story had captured her imagination. "He's a hero," she whispered. "Yes," Mitchell agreed, watching as Max patiently accepted the child's attention. "He certainly is. As we age, we often wonder if our life's work truly matters in the end. Henry Caldwell's story reminds us that even when the system fails us, when our contributions are dismissed and our integrity questioned, the truth has a way of emerging, perhaps not on our timeline, but in its own perfect moment. Like Max, whose instincts recognized what humans could not see. We too carry wisdom that transcends what's written in our personnel files or recorded in official histories. The courage to stand by our convictions, even when everyone else demands conformity. Isn't stubbornness its integrity in its purest form? Many of us have experienced our own version of Henry's story being pushed aside, watching younger colleagues dismantle our life's work, feeling the sting of forced retirement when we still had so much to give. But Henry's legacy reminds us that what we build with honesty and principle